Live from every Christmas movie you've ever seen, it's Pod by the River, episode 80. I'm your host today, Ed Hand, and I'm not exactly flying solo, but I'm without my normal co-pilots. It's just me, but I am joined by somebody that I'm very, very excited to have on. You've seen her on Nessun at some point. You've probably read some of her work. She's one of the best beat writers, I think, within a very large community of beat writers, and that's Jen Mccaffrey of The Athletic. How are you doing today, Jen?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, thrilled, absolutely thrilled to have you here. And we're going to talk a lot about baseball, but I am curious before we get to that. Just what's your origin story? How did you end up at The Athletic?
Sure. Yeah, let me think. Let me backtrack a bit. I graduated from Syracuse, freelanced for a while, almost a year. I got my first full-time job covering high school sports for the Cape Cod Times for 3.5 years. And then got my first job up in Boston for Mass Live, covering all pro teams, a lot of Patriots back in 2014. And was at Mass Live from 2014 to 18, doing mostly Red Sox, but a lot of Patriots. And then got hired by The Athletic in 2018 when they first started to expand to covering all the teams kind of across all the leagues. I've been, I actually helped out with Patriots too in the beginning there, but we kind of ended up hiring more dedicated Patriots writers as we kind of built out. And so, yeah, I've been pretty much Red Sox for The Athletic since 19. That's sort of the quick, I guess, the quick resume there.
The elevator pitch resume. Now,
Yeah.
did you grow up did you grow up a Red Sox fan, Patriots fan?
I grew up an hour south of Boston. Yeah, I grew up definitely watching all the Boston teams. So yeah, I'm a New England person for sure.
Did you have a favorite Red Sox team?
I was like a teenager in like '04, so obviously, that was kind of really when I got into sort of like wanting to do this for a career. I was devouring, I grew up outside of Providence, so I was kind of devouring Sean McAdams' coverage in the Providence Journal at the time, and just really reading and like watching everything I could. So that was in taking like a journalism class in high school, and then eventually getting into a journalism program at Syracuse and doing, couple internships for WEEI. So that was kind of, I guess that was when I really started to like develop an interest in like sports journalism and trying to like pursue it as a career.
Now, when you were working, doing high school sports for 3 years, something that I found, because I do primarily AAA stuff, like just minor league stuff, and I found that most of the people, this isn't the only job that they're doing. They're trying to break into the industry, and they're really hustling. Some of them are getting paid, some of them are getting paid a little bit, but not enough to support themselves. When you were first starting, was that the only job that you had, or were you working like multiple ones?
So when I was on Cape Cod, that was like my full-time job because I was also working like night shifts, like putting the newspaper together. That was it was like half reporting, half working like the sports desk and writing headlines and taking phone calls and all that. But the like 11 months or so after I graduated, I lived at home and I was freelancing. So I had probably like a dozen jobs. I worked overnight at like a Macy's stocking shelves. I was babysitting like 3 kids under 3. I was freelancing for the New Bedford Standard Times, doing like Legion baseball. I also at the time was freelancing for ESPN Rise, which was like a high school portion of ESPN. I was writing like draft profiles on guys like across the country. I kind of those were like the main ones, but I was like interviewing like for a bunch of different jobs. That was like 2010, and the journalism industry has never been great, but there was kind of like a lull in jobs around that time with like the where the market was at. So it was I was kind of trying to find any experience I could, and definitely had multiple jobs like trying to make it work, and not sure if I was ever going to make it work, but ended up, I moved to Philadelphia actually for like 3 months for like a part-time job at Philly.com, and like lived with my best friend's parents just to get like web editing experience. It wasn't even a reporting job. It was like working on the back end of the website. So yeah, it's the early days were not the easiest by any.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's something that I found that if you, and it's true for the minor leagues for the players, but it's also true for the people covering the game, for the people working at the stadium. If you want to make it to the higher levels of it, you have to really want it, and you really do have to work your ass off. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So let's get into what people are actually here for, though, and that's some baseball. So what were your thoughts on the Garrett Crochet trade? I feel like that's been the by far the most notable move, one of the only moves that they've made. What did you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a surprise. I think leading up to that, we kind of were seeing some reporting that the Red Sox were not really in on him, and kind of were, on the outskirts of the market for him. And come to find out, they were pretty much in the thick of it for, several weeks on end there. And one only started to heat up towards the end. But yeah, I think the package too, and giving up Kyle Teal was noteworthy and surprising. And Montgomery to a lesser extent, I think, just because we don't. Obviously, was a top ranked guy, but we just hadn't been able to see too much of him. And Teal more so because they were banking on him as the catcher of the future, right? And he probably would have debuted in 2025. So yeah, that was surprising. I mean, in another sense, they didn't have to give up Roman Anthony or Christian Campbell, and are still obviously still highly regarding Marcelo Meyer. So I think it's yeah, the package was interesting, the timing was interesting, and I think at the same time, Breslow was pretty forthright when we kind of sat with him in the Red Sox suite in Dallas, of just saying, like, we're not done yet. This is the beginning and not the end, and we know we have a lot more to do. So like, we have this is kind of, he said something along like the lines of, this move screams that we are planning to be in contention. So he's very much putting the pressure on himself to, make this a team that can get back to the playoffs for the first time in a few years here. So I think he's not really shying away from it, and kind of not patting himself on the back like this is it. I think they very much are still in the mix for more pitching, as he mentioned. So whether if they're still in the mix for Corbin Burns, it seems like they are, but that's been a little quiet the past few days. Whether they're in the mix for, all these other guys that are still on the market, like Bregman, or the trade talks for Nolan Arenado, I think there's still some pretty big names out there, and it sounds like they're not done. So we'll see. We've heard a lot of talk, the past few years, but I do think this Crochet deal is kind of a step in the right direction of putting a better and contending potential team on the field.
If the season were to start today and the rotation was as it is, do you think that Crochet would have the opening day start, or do you think that they would give it to Tanner Houck?
I think Crochet would. I mean, as much as Houck had a great season, I do think like they view Crochet as sort of the number one guy, kind of the just the prize of the offseason, if you will. And not for nothing, but if they are wanting to extend him and want to kind of, I don't want to say like sweeten the pot or anything, but to give him that experience of what it's like to pitch in a market here on opening day, then I think that would also go a long way. But yeah, I mean, Houck obviously had a great year last year, but I do think if the season started today, I'd be surprised if it wasn't Crochet on opening day.
So this is a question from one of my co-hosts who couldn't be here today, but what he said is that it seems like some sightings have come to a full stop after winter meetings concluded. Have the Red Sox interest in signing higher end free agents decreased since the Crochet trade, or is this more just due to inactivity across the entire sport right now? That kind of goes into what you were saying about Burns before.
Yeah, no, I think it's kind of more the latter. I do think that they're still like in the mix. It's just kind of these the deal like it's always kind of like there's such a trickle down effect of kind of how every team and every move affects every other, every other move that's happening out there. When one domino falls one way, it closes a door for a guy, and the money changes and all that. So I mean, yeah, it has slowed down a little bit, but there's still a lot of guys out there. And so I don't think they're they've said they're gonna spend, and not that I know again that they have said that in the past, but it does feel different this year. It felt like when they said, the whole full throttle thing last year, that they almost said it accidentally. I think that was kind of why they backtracked and at winter weekend, and we're sort of like, no, we kind of didn't mean to say that. They've repeated it, like they're almost like, saying it too often this year um to and like not avoiding it. I feel like last year when they said it like kind of the one time and then sort of backtracked. And now I feel like every conversation we've had with people, it's like they're still pushing that forward. And Sam Kennedy telling the Globe that we might even they he said we might even go over the luxury tax threshold. So it would be yes, they've done a lot of bizarre things lately, but it would be very bizarre to kind of like be saying all of that and then just that this is it. So I very much think that there's more coming. It's just kind of the way the market is right now.
Yeah. Now I'm just thinking back to I think it was 2023. No, yeah, it was 2023. You had the Xander Bogaerts as our top priority. Then last year it was the full throttle. Do you get the impression that the fan perception is significant to the current Red Sox front office?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, they've seen the ballpark filled with out of town fans. They've, seen ticket prices dwindling and NESN numbers dwindling. And I think it's finally starting to hit home a little bit. I think it's kind of twofold. I do think that they have for a few years now targeted 2025 as the year that a lot of these top prospects were going to be hitting their big league debuts and contributing, and therefore allowing them to kind of, if fans don't want to hear it, but like allowing them to spend more because they have a lot of these younger guys in the mix. So I do think they have like had 2025 as maybe this like target year of making a greater push. But at the same time, leading up to that, they haven't been good. There's been a lot of losing, and people are not accustomed to that or getting frustrated with that. And they're kind of feeling it in the bottom line. So I do think it's a combination of both of those things, where there is more urgency this year to kind of finally put a better product on the field, because you can only go so long with kind of being, a down and out team and people losing interest and only showing up because they want to, hang out with their friends in the bleachers. They definitely, I think, want to get back to being the team that's talked about, and people watching, and just everything that kind of goes into what they used to be. And I think they've realized that with like the people not showing up as much, and also with some of these young guys coming up, they're kind of, I think, banking on that excitement too.
Speaking of young guys coming up, the guy that's been, I think, after Juan Soto, the guy that people have been the most excited about is 23-year-old Rookie Sasaki coming over. And what I've heard recently, and I don't know where this started from, but I've heard that the reason that Burns and some of these other guys haven't signed is that teams are feeling out Sasaki. Have you heard anything one way or the other that Rookie Sasaki is what is holding up the market?
I don't think so. I think it's more of just guys are holding out for their own, bigger deals as much as they can get. Like the Sasaki money is so small compared to, what it's not, teams can only really spend their international signing bonuses on him. So it's like between like $5.5 and $7.5 million. They're not really allowed to negotiate like a contract extension for him before he signs. So I don't think it has much of an effect. I think that I can see why people might draw the line. It's like a kind of a convenient way to, make, that makes sense of what's happening. But I think it's just kind of the tug of war, of what the off season is, and just guys trying to get the most money that they can, and a very volatile kind of just industry and career path. These guys obviously never know when their careers are going to end, and so they're trying to kind of eke out as much money as they can, and it's frustrating for fans to kind of sit around and wait. But yeah, I think that has more to do with it than Sasaki and kind of where he lands.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is frustrating for Red Sox fans right now, waiting after Garrett Crochet, is just no one's really sure what they're actually trying to do. I feel like going into the offseason, it was pitching, maybe a right-handed bat to replace Tyler O'Neill or even bring O'Neill back. Obviously, that didn't happen. He's with the Orioles now. But a lot of what we've heard has just been maybe they'll sign Alex Bregman, maybe Nolan Arenado, and Rafael Devers moves from third base to first base. Do you get the sense that there's reality to those rumors? And what has been what you've heard? What has been your feel on the Bregman Arenado situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of, when they go into the off season, they kind of lay out all these scenarios because they don't really know where guys are going to end up. I think you saw that even with like the Soto stuff, like they had, I think Cora said we have plan like 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, 1E. It's not like they go into the off season being like, we're going to get this guy and this guy, because they obviously know that's just not reality. So I think all of these guys that we've heard about, the reason we've heard about them is because there's some truth to it. To varying degrees, they have interest in certain guys, but so do other teams. And how much are those teams willing to give up, and all that kind of. So there's so much. It's not like each team operates in a vacuum, and so I think, yes, like Arenado seems like an awkward fit, but like, if they move Devers to first base and then trade Casas, and like, you kind of have to figure out, have to like map out how all these things would work, and have like contingency plans. I'm sure in their mind they have like the ideal scenarios and then kind of the backup plans. So I mean, I think that's kind of why it feels to fans like, I think fans kind of probably wish, the Red Sox are like, this is what we're doing exactly, but obviously that's not how it works. And so that's kind of probably, that's why you're hearing all these names, and, names that maybe don't seem like they fit the roster exactly, super smoothly, but you kind of, they'll make it work, and kind of that's kind of what you do when you're roster building of, with guys that you already have on your team, right? You got to kind of fit guys in certain places, or maybe move people off their natural position, and kind of go from there. You're never always going to get your number one priority for every position, kind of across the field.
One guy that, and we mentioned this a little bit, but I feel like, to me, it's not the most intuitive person to be coming up in a lot of trade rumors, but I feel like the Tristan Casas rumors have just been nonstop. And I think that he's kind of a polarizing player. You have a lot of fans, he's their absolute favorite, and you have a lot of fans that they just think he's annoying. Why do you think he keeps appearing in these trade rumors? And and listen, I'm not expecting an exact number or anything, but what do you think the odds are that Tristan Casas is on the opening day roster?
I mean, I think he's like turned up in a lot of trade conversations because he's a good player, that has a pretty sky high potential, 40 homer potential. And that's, he's got several years of control, and a great, command of the strike zone. It's patient, obviously almost too patient. So I think there's just interest in him because he can be, that next kind of superstar but he hasn't really kind of reached that potential yet. So it's kind of like what, I think people always put a lot of stock in kind of, what someone can be. And he's shown flashes of it. And because he was hurt all of last year, it sort of was like, what is he actually going to be? So I think there is a lot of interest in him because of that. And he hasn't reached his potential. And so, teams are always looking for like young, controllable hitters that can be middle of the order bats for the next 10 years. And that he could be that. So I think, obviously the Red Sox don't have another first baseman in the system that would slot right in. So, but if they can get someone that would strengthen the team even more than, he does, then obviously it makes sense. But those are all kind of like the scenarios they have to play out. So it's not, I don't know that necessarily they've gone into the winter saying, yes, we want to trade him. It's that we'll consider it if we get a good enough deal. I think that's how they, honestly, I think that's how they consider every single player on the roster. And, on like even Roman Anthony to extent, like, I don't think they would, it would have to be an astronomical package, or an astronomical return, I guess. But like, I don't think that they view really anybody as off limits. And so I think that's why, it just, his name kind of keeps coming up, is that he's got a lot of potential, and with the potential he can offer, a great return for them, and then help them kind of move forward and kind of continue to be or try to get back into contention.
That's really interesting because I guess, and maybe it's just the way that the narrative has come out, but the implication has almost been that the team has been trying to dangle him, like, oh, they offered him for Bryce Miller or Logan Gilbert and Seattle turned it down. Like, have you heard anything about that, or is that more just things in the fog of war?
Yeah, I mean, I think like, they're looking for pitching. So and that's, I think it's like they will, whatever if they're looking for pitching, Seattle has pitching. What does Seattle want in return? Like guys that can hit. They don't have, much of an offense. They want guys that have years of control and who can hit. And who do they have? They have a guy like Tristan Casas. So I think it's more about that versus we want to get Casas off the team. It's like, what do you want and what can we offer? We want your pitchers. We want your top of the rotation, your young controllable pitchers. We'll give you a young controllable hitter. So I think it's more that than like, we don't want Casas on the team. Like, I think they highly regard him. They like him. They drafted and developed him. They want more of that. He's a first baseman and they don't have many first. So I think it's more that and then like, we don't like having him around, or we don't like how, he goes about the way he is. Like, I don't think it's any of that. I did a big story on him at the end of the year, and he was throughout the organization talked very highly of, they acknowledge several people, acknowledge, yes, he's got his quirks, but like that also, makes things interesting. And like, they can see, they also spoke a lot about just how he's like a leader of the young players. And, is very much when he was in rehabbing in AAA, how Marcelo and Roman Anthony and Teal too at the time were very much like attached to Casas at the hip, of kind of what is he, how did he make the jump from this top prospect in the system to the majors relatively smoothly. And so I do think, they're not necessarily like trying to trade him or get him out of the organization by any means. I think they would, if he is around next year, would be a great like asset for those young guys coming up. But if they can get a young controllable starter, which is so hard to get, and that's what teams are asking for is him, then they're gonna have to weigh it and have to consider it. So I think that's maybe more of the thought process than anything else that people probably have speculated on.
Speaking of young players coming up, it seems like the Red Sox have a ton of these middle infielders that are pretty close to making the jump. They traded Chase Mydroth, who was just blocked at every guy that I think is going to be a solid player. But they had traded Nick York also previously, and you still have a bit of a logjam between Marcelo Meyer is eventually going to come up to you, move Trevor Story to second base. But then there's also Vaughn Grissom, who you traded Chris Sale for. He obviously had a season in which he was very much injured, but looked a lot better at the end of the year, and still would be, if he was on the major league roster, would still be one of the youngest guys there. And then there was the rise of Christian Campbell, who just blasted up, was the minor league player of the year, and seems to be on the precipice of the majors. And that's not even counting a guy like David Hamilton, who had a pretty under the radar, had a pretty solid season, but is a better fit for second base than shortstop. How do you see them handling that? It's kind of an embarrassment of riches, and not a problem exactly. It's a good problem to have, but how do you see them handling that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably one of the bigger questions heading into the year, but at the same time, I don't think I would not be surprised if one of those guys you mentioned is not with the team come spring training just because of that logjam. I think they're still very much willing to trade from that group of, middle infielders or guys up the middle to alleviate some of it. Now, you don't want to just be left with like one guy, because injuries happen. And when you're talking about Grissom and Meyer, and Story, honestly, you need to have protection. But you can't have too many guys, because then what are you going to do with them? So yeah, I think, they're still, that's why, I very much feel that kind of no one is off limits, and it's more about just what, teams on the other side are looking for, and in how they value the guys that the Red Sox have. So, yeah, I mean, that's one of my big questions too, is like, who's going to be the opening day second baseman? Is that, do they give it to Grissom because he's here, or do they, feel that Campbell is, going to slot right in, or are they going to trade any number of those guys to make a different move? I think that's kind of that's among the top questions right now, of, as the next few months roll out, of what's going to happen there.
Yeah. Do you have any idea of where you would think that it ends up going? Because my feeling is that they let Grissom and Campbell compete for it, and whoever, but then it's like, are you going to take that much stock in like 5 weeks of spring training or whatever it is? It's that, but that I guess is what my gut is right now. Like, do you have any insight into what's realistic?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it does, make the most sense that it would come down to those two, and, let Campbell prove that he's ready. But I mean, honestly, Grissom too, all he really had at the end was the end of last season, was like that 1 month. But Cora kind of did go out of his way when we were talking to him last week to kind of bring up Grissom as having a really good offseason, how he's like gained some weight and looks a lot stronger, and has been, a lot healthier this offseason. So he was kind of going out of his way to like pump up Grissom. Now, is that because he's trying to say, this is my second baseman entering the season, or is that because he's trying to get interest from other teams of like, oh, Vaughn Grissom, like, I forgot about him, he's available? You always have to read between the lines when guys are brought up like that, especially when they're not like specifically asked about. So maybe it's another way. It's also, maybe he's trying to say that to get it out there so Christian Campbell hears it, and it kind of pushes him even more. So there's all like different kind of things that go into that kind of thought process. But it does make the most sense right now. And obviously Hamilton, like you said, had a great year. I kind of projects at this point as more of like a utility guy, but that's not to say that if someone goes down, he's not capable of sliding right in like he did last year. But again, they have a lot of moving parts. And Marcelo, like, he didn't even play at the end of last year in AAA, so he's going to need some time in AAA. So it's not like he's not in the mix really for the beginning of the year, but we'll see, where he ends up, towards the second half, and kind of they'll have to figure some things out. But yeah, it is, like you said, an embarrassment of riches, and they do. I think that's at the top of their list of trying to figure out where all these guys fit and who would be interested potentially in them, and what a team would want in return, and kind of figuring that all out.
So I've got 2 fan questions to send us home with. The first comes from Mr. Baseball, great username, and that is, what are the chances the Red Sox signed Teoscar Hernandez?
I mean, there was a lot of interest last year, and it almost happened, but obviously he ended up with the Dodgers. So chances, I don't know. At this, it is interesting. Like we thought he was going to end up signing somewhere shortly after Soto because he was sort of the next, viewed as one of the next best guys, right-handed, outfielder bat. But I don't know. Chances here, like he's got a good relationship with a lot of Red Sox people and he loves Fenway. So, I mean, I would think they're better than, me. I don't want to say 50-50 because that's probably like, too boring of an answer. I don't know. I'll give it a little bit of an edge and say like 60-40. I feel like he's one of the more likely scenarios just because he kind of fits. And has talked so much about how he would like to play here. He likes the fan base. He likes the atmosphere. He likes hitting at Fenway. And, obviously Cora's talked a lot, highly about him. So I think he would be a good fit here. And by all accounts is a great clubhouse guy. They'd have to kind of, move a few parts around, but at the same time, he would give you that kind of middle of the order thump that they need. So I do think in a lot of ways he fits a little bit easier than some of the other guys. And again, like you're gonna have to move some pieces around to still make it work. But yeah, I'll say 60-40 just to to try to throw a number on there.
All right, and this one's gonna take us home. Any funny stories from the season? So I'm assuming that just means within yeah. So I would say just pick one that you feel comfortable sharing, but that one's from at Lover Yamper.
Okay, let's try to think of something. I'm so bad at when I'm like put on the spot for stories. Funny stories. I mean, like, I don't know, this was like an ongoing thing. Where I sit in the press box, like I routinely get like 2 to 3 balls like hit directly at me. Obviously we have the windows open throughout the season, so it's kind of this like running joke that like the players are like targeting me, all the lefties in the box, because the way the ball obviously comes back to the press box where I sit, like there's the wall behind me is like all dented. And I actually at my desk right now I have like 2 balls here because just from not from this past year. A lot of them are hit so hard they like ricochet back out onto the field. But yes, I've almost been like creamed like several times. So I don't know. That's funny for all of you guys, not so much for me. Because I have my like head down typing or tweeting, and I always have to make sure I pay attention when certain guys are at the plate, and it's a lot of lefties. And so because the team is so lefty heavy, it's half the time I'm like, needing to make sure I'm keeping an eye on the field. So yes, maybe that's one that, that's one that comes to mind as I sit here right now. I'm sure there's a billion others, but my brain is like a mush from the whole season.
It's funny that you mentioned that because I have a press pass for the Woo Sox and I'm there a couple of times per series, but they don't have enough room in the actual press because you've been there before. Like it's not the big. It's really nice, but there just isn't a ton of space for all of the people that are coming in. So what I end up doing a lot of the time is I go out on the balcony and I take my laptop and I'm doing like whatever while I'm out there. But in the back of my head, there's always this fear that a foul ball is going to come and just nail my computer.
Yeah.
Just take it out. So I'm like always there's always that edge to it. Do you have, but I've come up with a lot of plans of action for what to do if it's hit in my general direction. Most of them involve me just trying to shield it with my body and taking whatever hit happens from it. But do you have a plan if the ball does get hit there? Like, do you think you have the reflexes to just catch one?
So like the guys in the press box always joke that every time I've never like caught one because again they're like coming off the bat at like 95 miles an hour, but I have been like hit in like the arm or like the shoulder one time. But I do apparently have a very calmly you can see it coming. That's the thing. Like you're always like thinking you're going to be able to catch it and you can see it coming and then it just like comes like so fast up at you. I've never had like one of those like soft, like it just comes
like
off
a pop fly or something.
Right. Yeah. They've always come like screaming into the press box and leave these like crazy dents and then like ricochet back out on the field. But they do all laugh at me because I kind of just like swipe my computer off to the side, and Ian Brown or like Rob Bradford's always like, "Wow, you just do this like without like everyone else would like freak out, and you kind of just like move it out of the way." I feel like it's just I've had a lot of experience at this point of almost getting killed. So yeah, hopefully I didn't like jinx myself for next year, but yeah, no real plan of action. Just hope it doesn't. More so, I just need to kind of be paying. I feel like I am paying attention, but you're typing, you're taking notes, and I keep score in my scorebook, and like obviously tweeting to make sure fans, I'm keeping them, up on certain things or whatever. So yeah, there's it's kind of like you kind of have to be very multitasking and also keeping your head on a swivel, I guess.
Is the scorebook something that's required for work for you, or is it just something that you're doing? Because I find
No,
that I
it's just
score to force myself to pay more attention to it.
yeah, it helps me just, and obviously when I'm writing my stories afterwards, I can just quickly kind of like glance down at my scorebook and to kind of like reference when a guy scored, or what his like what he did that night, like what inning he struck out or whatever, versus kind of like going through the play by play on like game day or whatever. So it just kind of like helps me, and it kind of helps me keep track of things. And I don't know, like I also kind of just goes back to the high school days of like covering, high school sports and having to, keep track of your own stats because no one else is going to give it to you. So it's just sort of something that kind of helps me with my like writing process.
Did you learn how to score from like the high school? Because I know again, this is just for me, but I would watch my dad do it, and it turned out that his way of doing it is like really different than like the official way of doing it. Because I feel like everybody has their own system. And
yeah, it's funny. I learned like when I was a kid at some point, and I definitely have sort of my own system. It's not like the super official system, but I actually, funny enough, in 2018, so one of the Red Sox PR directors, John Shestakovsky, is now the PR director for the Hall of Fame. And when the Red Sox finished the regular season in 2018, he messaged me. He knows I keep score, and asked if he could have like my scorecard from the final game of the season it wasn't like displayed in the Hall of Fame, but they have like all these records of things that I keep. So he wanted like a copy of it for their like record keeping, because it was the most wins in Red Sox history for a Red Sox team. So I was like, yes. Also, let me just make sure if anybody looks at this, I have it like, the official way instead of the Jen way. So I was like, I had to like go back and make sure that I like had everything very like correct and official, because I didn't want to send this thing to the Hall of Fame being like, whatever, something in my shorthand, and then someone looking at it and being like, what is this play? So yeah, but it is cool. I did get it like a letter from the Hall of Fame saying that like my scorecard is there in their like archives. So yeah, but definitely have my own shorthand, I think, for like how to keep score, but it helps. It makes sense to me.
Is that something though that you like call? Because I feel like for me, the first thing I would do is call my dad and be just like, Dad, I'm going to the Hall of Fame.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. No, yes, my parent, I'm definitely, keep my parents, apprised on all the things. But yeah, no, they thought that was, they loved, hearing about that. So yeah.
Yeah. So, really appreciate you having on. If people want to know where to follow you, where to keep up with you, like where would be a good place for that?
Yeah, so yeah, theathletic.com obviously has all our Red Sox coverage. I'm on Twitter. I know that's a dying breed, but JC McCaffrey, but also same on Blue Sky. So if you want to follow me there, I'm trying to build the following there, and be active there. So yeah, those are kind of the main places, but definitely at The Athletic, would love having more people read our coverage.
Yeah. Again, really appreciate you being on here. You're excellent at what you do. Look forward to your articles, and just thanks again so much.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.